Thank you for tuning in to Nonprofits Talk. On this show, we discuss topics related to nonprofit capacity building, specifically in the areas of marketing and fundraising. I'm your host, Terrence Harrington. Today, our guest is Elle Davis. Elle is a management professional with 10 plus years of experience in program and staff development, outcome measurement, strategic planning, resource management, and quality improvements. She currently owns and operates L. Smith Consulting, a consulting firm that specializes in the design and implementation of programs that support youth in their ongoing growth process as it relates to their physical, mental, and intellectual health, employability, and civic and social involvement. Welcome to the show, Elle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Terrence.
Oh, I'm so glad that you were able to make it today. We're talking about an interesting topic. We're talking about youth development and how organizations can start a youth development program. So let's dive right into it, Elle.
All right.
So the first question that I have for you is, what should a nonprofit consider before starting a new youth program?
Well, first thing is nonprofits really have to understand whether or not they have the capacity to start a youth program. Because oftentimes organizations want to serve the youth, but they don't have staff to serve the youth. They don't have finances to serve the youth, nor do they have the space to serve the youth.
And so, being that, the first thing that they should look at is their capacity to be able to have a program. A lot of times when we talk about youth programs, somebody just gets an idea. They see a lot of kids on the street, and they're saying that, okay, let me get something positive for these youth to do. So they probably haven't taken the steps to even think about what capacity building is. So an organization like that, I'm talking about true grassroots organization,
Yes.
what should they consider, when starting, any type of organized youth program?
Well, here's the thing. Those grassroots organizations can actually take those young people off the street and start some type of programming, right? So they can start a mentoring program. They can start any type of sports program where they have the young people coming to their facility. In the summertime, you can use the park districts. So you can play baseball or you can play basketball outside. So they really have the ability to be able to start something small that is more manageable. But then, of course, we're talking about a small group that may be no more than 15 to 20 students, so it just varies. But aside from, thinking about like, I really want to serve these young people, how am I going to do this? Then you decide, what is the program that you want to serve with those young people? Is it a mentoring program? Is it an arts program? Is it a dance program? And so you want to start and then map that out and say, okay, if it's a mentoring program, I want to serve 15 boys or girls or both in this mentoring program, and this is what I want to see at the end of the program.
Got you. So at that point, when we're really starting about putting the infrastructure together for a youth program, in the beginning we just started, so now we see that this thing takes money. You know what I'm saying?
Money.
It's more than a notion, so we need to, is the first step that do we get recognized by the state as a nonprofit organization? Should we get the 501c3 status immediately? What do and again, I'm talking about that grandmother that was looking out the window and said, "Let me get these kids off the street. Let me get something positive for her." So what should she do? If we were speaking to her today.
Well, I think that there's a couple things. So number one, if you are, the neighborhood person who looks out the window all the time and you see the kids ripping and running and you're like, they need to get off the street and they need to do something. Number one, you find other people who can help support you in doing that. You can't, no one can do it all on their own. So you have to, if there's a neighborhood block club, you take it to the neighborhood block club first and say, are there people that are experienced in this area? Do you have other connections or relationships or collaborations that we can pull together?
Gotcha.
Because if it's an organization that has no structure at all, there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah.
And you don't want, if it's one person who wants to make a change, I don't want people to think that you can't be the one person to make the change, because you can. But I would definitely recommend that first you partner with your local park district, you partner with your local church, you check out YMCAs if they're in your area, Boys and Girls Clubs, things of that nature, so that you can start there first as a base.
Oh, those are great points, because a lot of times people are islands unto themselves, and they don't realize that there is support out here. Or some people get the founder syndrome. I don't want anybody coming in with, ruining my idea or taking my idea, But at the end of the day, if people focus on the fact that we're doing this to provide a service for the youth, everybody's going to get whatever credit that they need to get, So the next question that I have, how do you determine what particular group of youth you should target? And I know I gave the idea of, you looking out the window and you see that, youth are just standing around.
Right.
But I'm quite sure you can't, you could, but is it feasible to integrate teens with adolescents and,
So my background, I worked at, excuse me, Boys and Girls Clubs of Chicago for many years.
Okay.
For almost 8 years. And what I appreciated about Boys and Girls Clubs of Chicago is that there was a separate structure for each group of young people. And so typically we had our 6 to 8 year olds that we serviced, and then 9 to 10 year olds, 11 to 12 year olds, and then our teens.
Okay.
Because you cannot service teens with 9 and 10 year olds.
No.
That just doesn't work very well, because teens have very different needs than the younger people. And then also when you're serving young people that are 6 to 7, their needs are different, and they need adults a little bit more than a teen programming. And they can't really direct the programming. Opposed to your teens, you can say, Terrence, if you're a teen that I'm serving, I can say, Terrence, what would you like to do?
Gotcha.
What kind of program would you like? Opposed to just dictating what the program is.
Right, so then that interaction, you're getting input from the youth.
Exactly.
And that leads me to my next question then. What type of programming should you offer? And I know you touched on mentoring, you touched on, summer camps and things of that nature. So what if I am a grassroots person and, I do organized sports? Well, what should I be thinking about?
I think it depends, again, on the age group that you're serving, because if it's teens, ask them. We forget.
Who would have thought that?
Who would have thought, right? So here's the thing. So we forget to simply talk to our young people.
Yes.
We talk at our young people, and we forget to talk to them. So I really want to say to the audience, especially those people that are in communities that see young people hanging out, have a conversation with them.
Yes.
You'd be surprised at what you find out about what they're interested in. With social media exploding, a lot of young people are interested in technology. And then older people, of course, shy away from technology. And sometimes even our, young people are involved in churches, but some of the church members shy away from it. And they're, because they're not certain. But that's where, and I know we'll get to this a little later, but that's where collaborations are so important. So that you can find the right people to connect with those young people. But I would, before you, go out there and say, I'm going to start a drum program. If you have no young people who are interested in drumming, then you should.
That's self-serving, huh?
It is, and I get it. But here's the thing, right? All of us, to a certain extent, are self-serving, right?
This is true.
But you have to then connect with your community and find out what's really needed.
Got you. What do you, in your experience of working, it was the Boys and Girls Club, correct?
Correct.
What were youth interested in?
Oh, well, so Boys and Girls Club is a little different because it's a national organization. There are a number of programs. So primarily there's programs in character development, there's sports and recreation, there's arts programming. So, and there was a saying at the Boys and Girls Club that young people vote with their feet.
Okay.
So
Meaning?
you knew if you had a good program because young people were there.
Okay.
But there's a little caveat to that because although they vote with their feet, and if you had a good program, it was good, really young people like the staff.
Okay.
So even if it wasn't a program that they were crazy about, if it was a good staff person, if they really liked the staff person, they would be at the program.
And see, that leads me to a question that I was going to have later on, about what type of skill set should you have as an individual thinking about starting a youth program?
Right.
Because that's so important to me. If I don't like you, or if I can't buy you, I can't buy anything from you. If I don't feel comfortable enough around you to, show my vulnerability, then, that resistance is going to be there. So speak to, some of the skill sets that a person should have, especially dealing with youth.
first off, you have to have a desire.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
that's a mouthful right there.
that's it. That's it in a nutshell. Because working with young people is not easy.
No.
And they challenge you in a lot of different ways. So first off, you have to have a desire. And then there are more youth development programs now. Like UIC actually has a youth development program track. Which doesn't always happen. And then there are some certifications, like the Advancing Youth Development certification. The Chicago Area Project was the lead in doing that, but I'm not sure if they still are at this point. But so adults who want to work with young people, number one, have a desire. Number two, if they don't have the formal education around it, I think that there's a lot of professional development opportunities within certain agencies, as well as that they can find on their own. Like there's the After School Alliance, and so that's a national organization, but there's also like the Illinois After School Network, and so they provide different trainings and such that people can get involved. Because I think that the professional development side of it is very important.
Yes.
And people tend to throw people into working with young people because they said that they want to, but then don't provide them with any structure of what that means.
Because again, when you said it's more than a notion about, having the desire, and I remember years ago, my wife and I, we adopted our kids' 8th grade class. And so we exposed them. A lot of the kids hadn't even been downtown Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Literally, the school, you could look out the window and see downtown, but they had never been down there. But what you said was so true. They had to trust us enough, because they had so many walls and layers of walls built up, so many disappointments, that it was like, wait a minute, who are you all coming in to talk about, stay in school and so on and so forth. And so once we exposed them to life outside of their 3-block radius, it made a major difference in their lives. And even to this day, and that was like 15 years ago, that these kids, some of well, they're adults now, you never know how influential you are on a person's life until, years later they come back and say, thank you. Thank you for just taking the time, of spending time with me.
Exactly.
Because sometimes, like you say, we throw our kids out there to the wolves, and that's why I think youth programming is so important, because of the fact that you get a chance to, meet somebody at the crossroads and possibly change the trajectory of their lives.
Absolutely. But that's the trick also in the sense of funding for nonprofit organizations, because you can't always determine that outcome immediately, right? And so you just talked about down the road, years later, you heard, well, funders don't want to hear years later.
Wait a minute, you in my brain, because that was my next question. How do you budget for a new program?
Yeah, budgeting is a whole nother ballgame. So it's, if it's an already existing nonprofit organization that wants to expand their reach, then I think that a lot of that is possible based on the grants that are out there. And I think the going rate is maybe around $1,500 to $2,000 per kid that an organization is serving. But that's still not a lot, because typically what that includes is that's administration, that's program supplies, that's space, that's that's everything. Which is not a lot.
Not a lot of money. No,
that's not a lot of money. And so this is a whole nother subject that I won't get into, but we even see that now with the cuts with CPS, and we're noticing from Chicago Public Schools how some of the schools' budgets have been cut drastically, and so that's a challenge, because that means that you're not able to buy the program materials that you really want for young people. Field trips, you just talked about, that 8th grade class not really being downtown, not, seeing it, but not experiencing it. Well, field trips, I think, in my experience as a direct service person, I always made sure that field trips were in my budget.
The cultural exposure.
It's necessary, because many of our young people don't go outside of their 3-block radius. And there's so much to experience, especially in a city like Chicago.
Exactly. Yeah, Chicago offers so much
awesome,
culture.
especially in the summertime, right?
But the thing, it always goes back to that yes, I have a desire to start this program, but I need money.
And so sometimes you have to find investors who understand the plight and understand and want to work with you and want to
Yes.
help. And so sometimes those investors are personal friends and family. And it's hard, I think, for new nonprofit organizations to get funding right off the back.
Yes.
Because some organizations feel like you're not established and you don't have the history. And so they're hesitant to give that funding, to newer organizations.
And it's so funny to me because you look at some of the established nonprofits, and because of their stagnant thinking, there a lot of the leadership is not innovative enough to really see what the youth of today really needs. You're still thinking the 90s when these kids are so technologically advanced that you're talking about having a whiteboard and they're on their smartphones. And so when a funder, and I hope funders are listening to this, that start listening to some of these new nonprofits. And I understand that you're going to possibly tell them, well, who else is doing what you want to do, collaborate with them, and that's great. But also, take a chance on them. Put some money behind it, because a lot of these up and coming young executives, they have some great ideas, and it behooves all of us to get behind them, and really, because our youth, that's our most precious commodity, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
As far as what the future is going to hold for all of us. So that leads to my next question. We were talking about collaborations. So how do you find collaborators to collaborate with?
I think what you just said, you find out, you do a search, whether it's on the computer, whether it's via your network, and you say, who's doing what I want to do? So if I want to start an arts programming, and let's say the art is dance. If I want to start a dance program because I see all of, members of my church or whatever it may be, and they dance a lot.
They're doing the
and
praise
they're real
dancing.
they're very interested, but they want to be exposed to something else. Well, who else does dance? Go to I don't know if Sammy Dyer still exists. My little cousin went to Sammy Dyer many years ago. But the Mayfair Academies, and a Hubbard Street Dance. You find out, well, you talk to the people there, you talk to the executive directors, and you ask them, well, how did you get started?
Yes.
What did you do? Do you open up for, do you have free programming? And so you start to build relationships, because no nonprofit organization, serving youth or otherwise, is going to succeed without relationships.
Yes.
Okay? And even the funding is not going to come without the relationships.
That's right.
So a lot of funders, whether they're private foundations or grants, they still need to know who you are before you apply.
Yes.
That's one of the most important things that I think. And so, and people also cannot despise small beginnings. So you may only have 5 young people that are in this dance program, but run the best program that you can with those 5 young people, because eventually it can and will grow if you're consistent with it.
Yeah, and I tell people, you don't have to strive for perfection.
Absolutely.
Excellence is good enough.
And just get started.
Get started.
That's the other thing. Get started.
Because that we get that paralysis of analysis. You overthink things, and we second guess ourselves to the point where those 5 youth that we did have, now they're going on to the next
thing. Exactly. So I think it's very important to just do a survey of who is in your network, and who is in your community, and talk to them about what they're doing and how you can then get involved with what they're doing.
Right. And see, people don't realize that as leaders, we still have mentors too.
Absolutely.
Who you can tap into, and and engage the pulse of, am I on the right track here? Is this something that I should be doing? So the question I have is about strategic planning. So that should be a part of the strategic planning, correct?
Absolutely.
Reaching out and your collaborations and so on and so forth. So
and
talk a little bit about that.
Having a strategic plan.
Yes.
So that's a whole different ballgame.
Right, you choked me.
I've been a part of boards where there has not been a strategic plan in place. And so the board has had to come in, and we have to work together to quickly get that going, because we can't just operate from a today standpoint. Right. We have to operate from a what's in the future, and what do we really want to do, and how do we want to do the work that we do. And so people have to really, so there's 2 different things. If you are the person in the community and you see that programming needs to happen, and this may not be your forte, and that's okay. You don't have to go out and start a nonprofit organization,
Right.
but you find the organizations and you potentially get on the board of those
Yes.
organizations. And then if you're a nonprofit and you're expanding your programming, that's very different. So you have to make sure that it is a part of your strategic plan,
Okay.
and that you look at and see, how can we serve young people? In what way do we want to serve young people? And is this for the long term, or
Gotcha.
is it a temporary stint that we're doing?
Got you.
You know, I did a consulting project back in 2010, I believe, with Illinois Action for Children,
Okay.
and it was a summer only program, and it was more direct service, but we partnered with tons of organizations
Wow.
across the state of Illinois, because Illinois Action for Children is not a direct service organization. You know, and so that was a temporary piece of their programming and what they offered, that had a major impact for that summer.
So was that a hard collaborate? Well, you were with the Boys and Girls Club. Do bigger organizations tend to partner with grassroots organizations? Is that a
Oh,
hard?
absolutely. So the project that I was talking about with Illinois Action for Children, we partnered with park districts, we partnered with small churches, we partnered with, you name it, we found them
If
to
the blood was
partner
flowing
with.
through them.
If they served young people and wanted to serve them that summer, we partnered with the housing,
Wow.
so with Chicago Housing Authority. So it's just a matter of what the program is and who knows where people are.
Got you.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. So what makes an effective youth program?
Oh my goodness.
That's a loaded question. That's a loaded question, El.
It is a loaded question. And I think an effective youth program, it depends on what you want to achieve. And so if you're a mentoring organization, an effective mentoring organization means that you've developed a plan and that you're putting the plan in
Got
place.
it.
You know, and then it becomes effective because the young people are changed by the programming. So to me, that's what makes an effective
Yes.
program. Making sure that it's planned and that it's laid out, and that that there's goals and objectives tied to it, and that there's an end result that you want to
So
achieve.
you're telling me it's more than just letting them play baseball or, outside, being outside, you know.
You all saw my facial expression. Yeah, it's so much more than that.
So we talked earlier about the 5 youth, so how many youth should typically be enrolled in a program?
It depends on the program. You can have some technology programs where you may be limited to 15 youth because
Okay.
there's only 15 computers.
Computers, right.
You can have a larger dance program that may be 20 because it may be a hip hop dance,
Got
or
you.
thinking about something that could be even larger, like 50 to 70, like South Shore Drill Team.
Mm.
So it really, I think,
Depends.
depends on what you're serving. When you have, I'm familiar with some robotics programs, and those teams sometimes tend to be smaller because they have to work so close
Got
together.
you.
So it
So it just
varies.
depends on the program. Gotcha.
Absolutely.
So now that I started the program, I got my collaborations. I know what type of youth I want to target. So how do I start the outreach? How do I get those youth to come to the program?
You get some youth ambassadors.
Okay, awesome.
That's what you do. You get some young people who are really excited and pumped up about the program, and you send them out.
Okay.
And you say, go get your friends who are also interested.
Right.
And you also, in this day and age, you have to use social media.
Yes.
People cannot be afraid of social media and scared to use it.
Right, it's your friend.
It is. It absolutely is your friend. And there's ways that you can use it for your benefit, and if you don't know how to do it, you get someone else who does. You can get an intern.
Right.
I was going to say, you can make internships and have the young people do it.
Yes, and that gives them something to do, and I mean, it's a win-win-win all the way around.
Absolutely.
Because not only are you providing them the opportunity to do their community service, but you're getting the youth involved, and that's helping to shape your programming.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, So we talked a little bit about the qualifications of the staff. How many staff members? And again, I know that grassroots. It's more volunteer, but when we start moving into paid salaries and things of that nature. And I guess it's going to be based upon the type of programming and the type of funders you can attract. Is that true?
A lot of that will be based on that, because a lot of organizations start off with volunteer staff, just because they can't afford to pay other people. And so once again, it's going to kind of depend on the number of youth you're trying to serve.
Okay.
I sit on the board for Polished Pebbles Girls Mentoring Program.
Okay.
And a lot of their staff are part-time staff because they facilitate group mentoring programs in the school once a week.
Gotcha.
And so there's, Kelly would kill me if I don't know the correct staff ratio.
Well, we don't want to put you on the spot, then. Don't.
But I'm not exactly sure how many part-time facilitators Polished Pebbles has. But we have those part-time facilitators that go into multiple schools.
Okay.
So, like, one facilitator may be responsible for 2 or 3 schools.
Got you. So, we already talked about it. We hear so much about predators and things of that nature. So I'm quite sure that background check should be an important, component of your strategic plan.
Absolutely. That should happen for all volunteers. And it does not matter if they're volunteering for 1 hour or for 10 hours. Every volunteer needs to go through a background check, as well as all staff members.
Now, does the state offer any free services? Because, again, if we're talking about that grassroots organization that doesn't have a budget to pay for whatever the amount is to have a background check, is there a service that they can tap into to get that done for free?
Now that I'm not sure if there is a service available for that, but I'm sure that there are human resource organizations that can support that, because a lot of the time it's your human resource staff who is running those background checks and getting familiar with that.
So you would possibly get some type of company to sponsor that for you?
Potentially, absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of your wish list items. It's something that you need, right? You need to make sure that you have it. So or that also may be where collaborations come into play.
That's it.
Because you may be able to use one of those organizations that you're working with who can run the background checks for you.
This is the nonprofit circle of life, huh?
There you go. Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah. So we talked about goals and objectives. So what are some of the goals and objectives an organization should have, besides keeping you safe?
It really depends on what type of program they're running. And so a lot of what you find is, in this day and age, it's employability for teens especially.
Yes.
Making sure that they're employable. It's helping young people improve their grades and behavior, as well as attendance at school, because we have a lot of young people who are either not going to school because of issues at home or dropping out. That's still an issue.
Yes,
that we
that's
face,
a huge issue
in the city. And so, your goals and objectives often are around those. And then if you're doing more creative programming on the arts side, it may be to get young people to learn this dance and to perform. Maybe, they would actually perform as a part of the Bud Billiken or something like that.
Wow. And see, a lot of these, you got my brain is spinning, because before, when my wife and I, we were starting a nonprofit, we wanted to provide youth service, because we understood that, the youth, that we just had an affinity for youth, because when I was growing up, I was raised in a single female headed household. So nonprofits saved me, kept me off the streets, and so we were able to go to the Museum of Science and Industry and all of these, places that you and I were alluding to earlier today, and so how many days of the week should organization be open for you?
I would say 7 days a week, but
right. in the perfect world. Huh?
In the perfect world. But no, definitely. Ideally, if it's an organization that is focused on youth programming, it should definitely be open at least 5 days a week.
Okay.
If it is a small, grassroots starting up, I would say 2 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week, ideally. Just so that there's some continuity with the young people that are being served, and so that they don't feel like they're being abandoned. Right. You do this program, but then you're gone.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. So I would say 2 to 3 days a week.
Okay. Starting off.
Yeah.
And then from
and even if you have to start off once a week, as long as those young people know that for the next 15 weeks,
it's going to be
on Tuesday from 3 to 4 or whatever the time frame is, this is what we're doing. So and you show up every Tuesday.
So communicating with the youth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think, because we talked about earlier, we don't talk to the youth. they do have minds.
Absolutely. We have to talk to them, you all, not talk at them.
Right.
We have to talk to them.
Right, exactly. So, in closing, what are some other things that you think that a youth organization should have as far as in order to set themselves up for success?
So I alluded to it earlier. Professional development is so important. Oftentimes for youth serving, nonprofit, all of those organizations, the first thing that goes is professional development funding.
Yes.
And so people say, well, we can't train our staff. Well, if you can't train your staff, you're not going to keep them motivated and you're not going to keep them up to date with what's new in the youth world. And so, you know, that is one of the most important things that I think people really need to hone in on, and making sure that their staff are trained and know how to work with young people as they change.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Elle, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Like I say, you've given me so much information, and I'm quite sure our audience is going to be able to benefit from the pearls of wisdom that you provided to us today. So, audience, if you want to learn more about Elle and her company, I want you to go over to our website, Nonprofits Matter, www.nonprofitsmatter.org. Again, that's www.nonprofitsmatter.org, and there will be a link to her organization, and you'll find out all the great things that she's doing today. Elle, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Remember, nonprofits, if people don't know you exist, they can't support you. So continue to keep doing the great work that you're doing out there.